Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Beautifully Broken podcast. I am here with my medical Sherpa, Caleb Greer.
How's it going, guys?
Caleb, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Nice to be here. It's a great Tuesday. Nice and muggy out here in Texas, and I couldn't think of a better place to be.
Yeah. So we got this beautiful sign on the wall, Dasein Health. I say Daesin, but Dasein Health is your model of what you consider wellness to be. Can we start there?
Sure. Yeah. So, Dasein comes from a German philosophy from Martin Heidegger, and essentially it's conglomerating someone's whole life and purpose and meaning grounded in what's called the here and now. And so that's kind of exemplifies the program that someone is brought up in, their adolescence and early life, and how it manifests in their kind of mode of being when they come to see me, and then also how that also influences their future, because there is no future without kind of having an idea of where you're at and aiming for something in that, near goal-oriented kind of position. So really it's kind of taking their physical presentation and then it's adding an element of their mentation and mental life and emotional life, and then also appreciating the spiritual aspects of what it means to kind of be a human and also have the burden of consciousness on the side of that.
Yeah. What do you consider healing to be? Like if somebody said, Caleb, what is healing? I always, you're my guide, so you understand my health history. I come at it at a very unique lens. It's always, I've moved through some heavy shit, and now it's really fun to be optimizing. Mm-hmm. But I get to talk to people all over the world, and everybody has a different experience. So what do you consider healing to be?
So healing, I guess at its most fundamental level for me, is the return to all preferred states that would otherwise get all of an individual's needs met, from a very low-level needs as far as homeostatic affects are concerned. So, thirst and hunger and, sleep and rest and restorative functions. And so making sure the organism, number one, has all those things met and means to have those met. And then on the higher level of it means to kind of promote more opportunity and to promote better means of getting those needs met once they're already foundationally met. So again, there's the baseline return to homeostasis, and then there's the optimizing all the different methods of maintaining that low level of what we'd call kind of free energy.
Yeah. It's really interesting to understand our blind spots and our bias and, things that I believe to be true for everybody, which are just not. And one of the things about meeting you and coming in your clinic is understanding how you've set this up to really meet a lot of different people coming with different belief systems about health. There's optimization. You have the ARX machines. You have red light panels. You've got an ice bath. You've got Katsu bands. You've got the green emerald laser. Now, if anybody doesn't know what this is, don't get worried. We'll unpack it all. But you provide so many different stacks in which people can. It's a different way of looking at health. Can you talk a little bit about why you've designed the clinic in this way?
Yeah, so, really kind of all birthed out of this, the amount of excuses that people have to not do things that are beneficial for them, right? And so essentially doing what I could from the practitioner side of things is, guide people to make better decisions or kind of open them up to the experience of choosing how things are going to impact their health in different ways. But at the end of the day, once they leave, it's kind of out of my hands. And so, when I separated and made this clinic as a unique entity, what I wanted to do was, as much as I could, take excuse out of the picture. So finding things that had the biggest bang for buck, the most return on temporal investment, things like the ARX, things like, ice bath, those really kind of consolidate the amount of time that someone has to spend doing those things outside of their day-to-day life that can then pay dividends on the back end, because, they can spend 40 minutes a week doing exercise for sure. Not only that, but then those 40 minutes are actually the most beneficial they could do from a resistance training perspective. And once people get into that habit, it kind of opens the door to be motivated to do more things. And then we just kind of pass them on to the next phase of the clinic, right? So then They'll start to do the ice bath. They'll start to do the red lights. They'll start to, stand on the vibration plate. They'll start to use the Katsu bands, because it all becomes this funnel and a good avalanche down into really taking care of themselves, because they see the benefit on the back end.
Yeah. So you're the other big advantage you have is you're running a clinical practice. You're looking at labs, hormones, biomarkers. Have you got to work with a lot of people who are doing none of these things versus people who are just coming in to get their labs looked at and try to manage it on their own? Have you seen, what does that look like? What's that split look like?
In terms of clients that just come for the medical piece of it and don't use the
Yeah.
stuff?
Yeah. Do you see a big difference at this point? I know it's relatively new what you've set up.
So, I'd say for the most part, unless people just kind of live way out, either north or south or outside of the kind of the pocket here, I would say a majority of the clients use most of the tools that are available. Number one, because they're mostly included, in their kind of concierge membership. So they're paying for something and they want to have the value truly extracted from it. So it kind of behooves them to use the tools. And then it really just becomes why would I not come and do this? I feel so good. I get great benefit. And, I reduce the total time that I have to spend doing exercise, doing stress management techniques. And really the opportunity cost is too high not to.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. I will often post a video in my Jeep, and I'm like, I am headed to my doctor's office where there is the ARX, and maybe I'm going to jump on this high gravity vibration plate. And people it's always like a post that people are like, your doctor has that? Your nurse practitioner, which we mentioned in the beginning, has these things in practice for you to use. It's included as part of the service. It really is a model that's incentivized for people to be well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's really the thing, right? It's I want to elevate the health of, not only my service community and eventually, expand it, but for me as a practitioner, right, my intrinsic motivation is to ultimately see the population get healthier. And if I don't do what I can to really augment that and to kind of mitigate the reasons that they can't be healthy, then I'm doing myself a disservice. Then the next time I see someone and they haven't implemented their exercise program, it's not about looking bad. It's about feeling that they could have done better in that time frame and that I could have supported them in a way that now I have.
Yeah. There's 1,000 different ways I could go here on the slope of questions. And I'm going to own this right now because I'm going to jump around a little bit. You mentioned population.
Mm-hmm.
The most impact on the population. There's a lot of people on the planet. Like, how are you going to integrate this model for the vast population to make this change in society that is needed?
Yeah, well, ideally, it's just starting small and doing, my due diligence and kind of being a good steward of the small population that I have, making sure it's a model that is sustainable and does work, over time. And then, eventually it's going to be, how did I get this done? How did I do this and make it something that was sustainable and profitable and obviously has a good impact on people. And so down the road, it's probably going to be something, either my ideal is going to be to have kind of a residency type program where I can train people in the clinical experience and not just teach, this, the actual knowledge aspects of what it means to do this and how to interpret labs, but actually how to take in the Dasein of individuals and see the uniqueness and nuance of every person. Because once you start to see patterns and get a better recognition of how things pop up in different regards, you get this real humility. And I think that is one of the largest pieces of being an effective practitioner, is just knowing that I'm going to have someone walk in the door today and not box them in to my own patterns. It's like I have an understanding and prediction of what things could be like, but I never walk in thinking I'm going to have the solution or the answers right off the bat. And that needs to be seen on a training level, right? When people can understand that I'm asking questions at the same rate that the clients are asking questions, right? I'm not always saying that I have the answer, right? It's walking through things and looking at probability distributions and kind of having more of a humility in interpretation and not leaning on any one kind of for sure diagnostic pathway. And it's a lot of trial and error. So that being one of the avenues, and then obviously kind of having a program to teach other practitioners to implement or using the model and helping them into consult and how to actually navigate that process too. So those are the two real methods that I see branching out.
Yeah, I love the word humility. And, you know, there have been so many times from my experience where you felt like, well, this guy's trying to get me in his treatment box right now and it's not, doesn't feel good, it's not working. In your clinical practice, what have you seen? Is there something that really sticks out is like maybe the 2 or 3 biggest hindrances to people moving into homeostasis, getting everything that they need? Is it movement? Is it nutrition? Is it mental health?
Honestly, it's mental health. I mean, it's the value systems and belief structures and really the biases that people have kind of moving into what it means to be healthy. But also it's the decisions that people have made to be successful and to have, you know, the life that they desired. But it kind of ends up, I mean, they kind of end up robbing Peter to pay Paul in a sense, because they use their conscientious attitude or even, you know, early life traumas to cope and defensively strategize for how to kind of be at the top of the hierarchy and really kind of at the expense of others become a high performer, or the exact opposite, right? So they might have some kind of coping strategy that really hinders their ability to be a fully recognized, you know, individual self. And so helping people navigate who they think they are and really kind of get their sense of self up to speed as far as where they want to be and how they want to live the rest of their life. That's really the biggest piece that most people appreciate outside of just physically healing.
Yeah. I'm so glad you said a value system. It's so important. And I'm always reminded how much the percentages of the brain that's running on the subconscious, telling us what to do. And unless we, you know, the power of pause or I'd love to hear, to make a question for you, I'd love to hear the 3 or 4 things or the few things you have in the office that you like to start using as a tool to let that work be broken open or introduced to a client.
Yeah. So, you know, in the broad scheme, I think one of the best things really is to journal and write kind of a comprehensive small autobiography. And that the tool that I use is actually Jordan Peterson's self-authoring suite. Mm-hmm. And so I tell people, you know, the best way to kind of identify where you are and how you got there is to write out the journey of themselves. And so that tool in and of itself has been really helpful for people, not only to reimagine their past, but to also find out where they've forgotten that there's residual affective disturbance, right? And so people will kind of start walking through this and they'll start to feel emotion about different events that they'd kind of thought that was over, or they'd processed it efficiently. But in lieu of walking through this extensive past, they actually see that, hey, you know, I wrote about this thing and it made me feel a certain way. What's that about? And so then we'll kind of navigate, well, feelings are kind of what generate that subconscious driver to correct something. And so going back into those states of mind and figuring out how to process it as their younger self, number one, but then to actually put their older adult self in that scenario and grow out of it, right? Mm-hmm. So we use a lot of mental visualization and, you know, that journaling technique, and also, you know, ketamine assisted therapy and transcranial magnetic therapy.
Yeah. Talk to just for people about transcranial magnetic therapy, just if nobody's ever heard that word and it sounds interesting. And I've seen this unit in the back. It's really cool. You're going to sit in like a dentist chair with like this like gnarly helmet, and there's some cool noises that come out of the machine. What's it designed to do? So
the transcranial magnet, you know, it's repetitive transcranial magnetic stimulation. Basically, it's a magnetic coil that, you know, produces an electromagnetic field and stimulates parts of the brain that the coil is over. So for the uses of anxiety and depression, you know, it's the left and right dorsolateral prefrontal cortices. And what that does, you know, based on the parameters that we set with the frequency patterns and the bursts and those parameters, we either stimulate areas of the brain that are underactive in those cases, or we inhibit the part of the brain that's overactive in those circumstances. So, it's a neurostimulation technique. It's not modulation. We're actually getting active potentials and changing the underlying firing patterns of the neurons. And what that does over time is it disrupts kind of the default mode network, and it encourages better communication with more of the subcortical midline structures that generate how you feel about yourself and how that self-talk is kind of generated. And, on top of that, when we do more of the psychedelic assisted therapies as well, we can kind of take the cortical representations of those voluntary thought processes and then use that to augment what we do on a more subcortical level too. So we're kind of meeting both top-down and bottom-up processes.
Yeah. Yeah, this is certainly a different model than just going in and saying you need Prozac.
For sure.
It's different.
Yeah. And that has its case, right? I mean, some people just can't deal with the affective burden of, certain experiences, and so those medications have their place, but it's never going to be a long-term scenario. If someone has an event that they need to medicate for a short period of time, the idea should always be to go back and process the event, not just live with a medication suppressing those feelings to the point where, again, you're just going to start building this stuff under the rug, and eventually you're going to trip over something.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And I agree with you. Like, medicine is needed. I think we could redefine what the medicine is. Could it be a heavy dose of psilocybin? Could it be some of these more natural compounds that do allow the brain to repattern or reprogram? It's really interesting thing to explore. When you have somebody come in this scenario, how would you make that assessment as a guide, as a Sherpa through health, that they would need the transcranial magnetic stimulation? Is this all by subjective experience? Is there a way to map the brain and look at areas that are not firing correctly?
Yeah, so we actually just kind of invested in a QEEG to start doing brain mapping kind of before and after from a diagnostic perspective to see not only with TMS, but, what does the premenopausal mind look like? What does the postmenopausal mind look like? What does it look like after hormone replacement therapy? So we're really trying to use brain imaging as a biomarker for not only success of different therapies, but also the success of the actual mental health intervention. So that is one way, but, before that, because we literally just got it, we'd use different questionnaires and psychometrics to see, what the affective life of an individual looks like on paper. And then you just listening to people and talking, it's like you would benefit from less mental chatter. Really anyone from even a cognitive enhancement perspective can benefit from increasing left prefrontal cortical activity and reducing, right. So, as far as kind of getting someone's brain optimally functioning from a neurofeedback perspective, we'll have those tools online, eventually. But really, when people have had therapy for a long time and they're kind of stuck, or they're not getting anywhere after that, or they kind of have the same experience over and over, or they just can't integrate the changes they know they need to make in therapy in real life, like that translation is more of an issue, then sometimes they just need more of an in-depth therapeutic intervention to break through those barriers and then to ingrain it with the neuroplastic changes that you get from something like TMS.
Yeah, incredible. It's a great way to explain it and describe how that's different as far as like an assessment, moving somebody through, and then you're going to have all this great data because you're in clinical practice, which is exciting. As you're talking about teaching this to other people. The other place my head goes is when you're seeing people, this isn't about a visit. It's not come and see me when, that, like you so eloquently said, I've tripped over something, I've fallen, and now I have really high blood pressure, or my A1C is spiking through the roof after ice cream. Yeah. It's a community model, or you do a monthly subscription that people sign up for. Is it a year contract? I don't even know. Mm-hmm. I should know.
No, it's just per month. Yeah.
Per month.
Kind of cancel anytime type of thing.
Cancel anytime. What a great thing. Just like Netflix.
Exactly.
I'm done with this. I've done enough for my body and my health and my mental health and my functionality, my human vessel.
Well, and interesting, that's kind of partially a goal to have people graduate to the point where they no longer really need the kind of supervision that the membership kind of concierge model is about. But I'd say really 95% of the population is not going anywhere, right? I think they've, especially through COVID, realized the utility of having kind of someone on call, so to speak. And things just pop up, and until people actually recognize how difficult it is to get these kinds of services on a normal basis, they're just kind of surprised. And so once they have it and realize how good it is, they keep it rolling.
Yeah, we got a puppy outside that's like I usually take a dog barking on a podcast as like an energetic signal that like you're on the right path.
Yeah. Aries she's a sweet girl.
What kind of puppy is Aries?
She's a toy Australian Shepherd.
She's a toy Australian Shepherd. My grandparents always had Australian Shepherds.
They're great dogs.
Great dogs. So intelligent. Hyper intelligent dogs. Yeah, that's really cool. I didn't realize that. The when we talk about the model or the idea of being, for me, I feel like I'm invested on a different level. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I obviously, there's two places I want to go with this. There's a little more ownership in how I'm showing up for my health, even though I'm like, I'm very type A. I'm like, people that are listening to this, they're like, yeah, you're super type A, Freddie. But it's different. There's a responsibility. Like I'm showing up for my ARX workouts. I'm showing up to even, or I do an IV infusion. I'll come work in here. I'll bring my computer and laptop sometimes. So it is. I really enjoy that aspect.
Yeah. When too, it's like in between appointments when I'm in and out, and I see people here, like I get to talk to them, I get to catch up, even outside of a normal office visit or circumstance. Like usually, before it was just email and visit, and now I can see people kind of as they come in and out. I can watch people change literally before my eyes. If I miss somebody for a month and I see them, like, oh, how much weight have you lost? Like, oh, I'm down 20 pounds, and my ARX machine, force outputs are going way up, and I feel amazing. It's really nice to just get small touch points throughout the day.
Yeah. I would love to have all your clients stacked up outside in like a line and like take pictures. Like you have like a sexy clientele roster.
Yeah.
Like you have a very like good looking people. People are like looking really good. You watch people come in and they're doing their peptides and they're on hormone optimization and they're pushing weight and they're in the ice and they look really amazing. Like I'm thinking about the clinics I used to go to in New York City, which was just no judgment on anybody's body, but people are kind of wrecked and they're hyper stressed out.
Yeah.
And they're not doing any of these lifestyle things. So I'm really impressed by that every time I come into the office.
Yeah. When it's been a journey, man. I mean, again, I've had some of these clients for 3 or 4 years now, and watching them go from unhealthy in the sense from their literal physiology, not even using anything from a body composition perspective, but again, just seeing changes in the blood work and seeing changes in their mood and their attitude and their ability to be motivated to do the things they need to do to continue those changes. That's been the most substantial thing for me to see kind of over time and track.
Yeah. One of the big questions I get online is I post a lot about the toys, and it's like people are like, well, Freddie, should I buy this or should I do this or that looks so cool, should I get one of these? Mm-hmm. I always, the more I'm in the space, the more I pause, and the less eager I am to say, yes, it's awesome, it's amazing, because I understand how the human psyche works. Like the Peloton bike or the LightPath LED can quickly turn into a clothes rack.
Yeah.
And I see this a lot. Like I always said, a great business model for anybody out there, I give business models for people a lot online. You should start a website called Biohackers Garage. And you should start buying up all the ice baths, because I know this to be true, that people are buying these ice baths, and I bet you it's like the jacuzzi times 10.
Yeah.
Because not only is it not, it's not even really warm and enjoyable to get in. It's just like, it's this pain point. Like, no, I'm not going to get in that without someone cheering me on to do it.
Yeah.
You know this is happening. So without a guide, without a Sherpa, these things can be really they can be really problematic. And then it becomes this other failed attempt in which your psyche is like, oh, I didn't show up for myself again. Look at how bad I am.
Yeah, those are really good points. I mean, I haven't even thought about it to that extent, but I mean, even personally speaking, I would buy these things as investments for the future, but I would have access to them like in my home, and I would hardly ever use them. I mean, I still have this stuff in the clinic, and I use probably half of it as much as I should.
Yeah.
Right. And so you do tend to kind of lose the urgency behind accessing the tools when you own them.
Yeah. Yeah, unless you've been through metastatic cancer and Lyme, and it helps you move through the day.
Yeah, well, and that's like the same thing with dietary changes, right? If I ask somebody to be gluten-free and they don't feel any bit different, it's a lot harder to maintain than someone who has, gluten intolerance and they eat a piece of bread and they blow up and have, intestinal pain for 2 days. So, yeah, the intrinsic motivation when you have benefit from using the tools is a lot greater than just having it there and thinking you're going to use it for, some physical problem that you really haven't gotten to the root of anyway.
Yeah. I talked to a girl yesterday that was pretty famous. It's wild. I'm in the gym and this name pops up. I was like, is that from the thing and the movie and the television? Yep. Yeah. I'm like, so we just start chatting, and this great human being, great energy, is doing all the work, doing the breath work, and she's in the ice and she's meditating, she's journaling. By the time she got done telling me the things, I was like, I got to breathe. And I was just saying, like, who's your guide? Who's your person that's have you ever heard the word energy behind the action? Or have you ever thought about where does this apply? Where's the space in between the words? Where's the space for you? Where's the pacing that you're allowed or not allowing yourself to unpack some of this stuff? And it just wasn't there. And I see this. It's part of capitalism. It's part of, our perception, what other people are doing in the world. I'm like, wow, how are they putting out all that content? And they're a functional medicine doctor, and they have a podcast, and they speak all over the world, and they have a book. Is that real? Probably not.
Yeah.
So how do you make time for yourself to both stay educated and continue to learn and be able to see all these people and work in this very functional model that you've birthed or birthing?
So I mean it's a good question, and honestly, there's been a lot less me time with the development of the practice because all the back end work that typically people have 2 or 3 other employees doing these kinds of work, like with the billing and all the back office stuff, that people kind of don't think about. But generally speaking, I gotta do my work when the kids are asleep, right? So I got 2 young kids and and a family to also be a good husband and father in my job description as a self, right? And so, usually that means waking up early before so I can get some reading done or maybe do some emails before, the day starts. And then fortunately with clinical practice, it is its own educational system.
Yes.
So I'm getting, exposure constantly to things that not only generate new questions for me to ask and research and actually get adept in, but it's also reinforcing all the patterns that I've already recognize and kind of facilitate on a much more rapid basis, right? So I can read and interpret most blood work within a very short period of time that actually lets me do more background research on the things that I don't know, right? So it just kind of opens up this whole window. And then it's really just about managing time. And that's where the RXs come in super handy, right? I don't have to work out 4 hours a week anymore. I can just work out for 20 or 40. Right. It takes out the need to do, a lot of standard cardio, right? I've got the assault bike that I do my interval training on, right? And I can see with the devices that I have that every metric that I would ever want to increase as far as VO2 max and my force output, the actual muscle mass that I carry, they're all improving. And so as far as opportunity cost, when I have all of these buckets to fill, finding things that were important for me to also increase the amount of time that I can spend with personal growth and familial growth has been, really important. And that's what I've also kind of translated into the practice in general. Less time doing the things that we need to do, but get the minimally effective dose for longevity and health span, while opening up time to do other things they actually enjoy from a habit or hobby perspective.
Yeah, that's a great answer. I appreciate that. I'm always concerned for people when they start a business and because you're like, oh man, this is going to be, part of the growth is the beauty and the hardness or the difficulty or the challenge of unwinding the challenges, where the where your Everest moment is going to come from. So I'm excited for you. I know you have the resources to be able to get through it in a beautiful way. What do you see in your clinical practice? What are some of your favorite things to watch people get into and add into their lives, where you see it just a huge return on investment?
I'd say probably women going through the menopausal transition, and the second one being weight loss. Right. So I think those two have the greatest temporal satisfaction because they see benefits so quickly, and you see their attitudes and motivations and behaviors kind of change so rapidly that it's a huge kind of dopaminergic burst for me to just incentivize that kind of thing more and more and more and more. It's also one of the biggest challenges too, because when I get people that have been to other practitioners or so forth to kind of manage their hormones, it just hasn't been the best. It's not usually because that practitioner isn't good. The individual is just going to be more nuanced and have different receptor proclivities than the normal population. So it's a little bit more of a puzzle to solve. Same with weight loss. I get a lot of weight loss resistant people where they're eating right, they're exercising, they fast, they do all the things. And then even the interventions that we have now available with, the GLP-1 class, like semaglutide and tirzepatide, sometimes those still don't work, right? So really having the population that, again, keeps you humble as far as seeing the people that they're outliers. And outliers are what drive best practices.
That's amazing. Outliers are what drive best practices. So can we talk about that a little bit? Why does that present in a human being? Why that resistance to weight loss? You've obviously had some success with unraveling some of these outliers. Maybe you can give a couple examples.
Yeah, for some people, they're just genetic, right? So some people have initial or intrinsic variants in how they metabolize triglycerides, for example, or how well they release insulin in response to their blood sugar spiking, right? And so using different tools to augment those physiologic responses really just takes more of it takes a deeper dive into their physiology beyond just the blood work. So it looks like getting their genetics done and looking at those single, polymorphisms. For other people, it's environmental toxicity, right? It's what's in their water that's keeping them in a kind of intrinsically stressed state to kind of promote fat storage and prevent fat loss. For some people, it's dysfunctional mitochondrial enzyme function, right? So all the steroidogenic enzymes that live in the mitochondria that take cholesterol into pregnenolone and so forth, sometimes those have little blockages or are just not as sensitive. So using peptides or different compounds to augment the different genetic outputs like PPAR gamma or the bile acid kind of receptors in the gut too. So it's a lot of trial and error, and fortunately, the more trial and error you get, the more pattern recognition you get for those nuanced cases, and you could say, okay, well, this didn't respond classically to that, so that kind of puts them in this bucket, and then we're going to try these things, and maybe they respond to that. Great. If they don't, then we've got these kind of tertiary level things to use to see what's the problem. And sometimes it's just adding a whole slew of things.
Yeah.
But getting their water taken care of, getting their health or their beauty products taken care of, right? To make sure that it's not the environmental overexposure to chemicals and intoxicants that are backing up the ability to kind of recycle lymphatically.
Yeah. What's your favorite way to assess mitochondrial health at this time?
It's not. I don't think I really have one, right?
Yeah.
It's more of it's a symptom presentation, right? So
right.
It might look like T3 resistance, right? It might look like high reverse T3. It might look like just fibromyalgia or just pain across the board, right? So usually in those cases, there is a test out there that you can take a buccal swab and look at mitochondrial complex activity, and that can kind of be a good insight. But still kind of getting developed, and it takes a while to get the results back, and it's not super actionable. But generally speaking, it's what is their respiratory quotient, right? What are they burning at a resting state? Are they in fat burning mode when they're kind of offline in their steady state, or are they burning carbohydrates all the time? I've actually had a couple clients, that just don't tolerate the removal of carbohydrates or even like a normal blood glucose, right? So they'll be sitting at 85 or 90 and feel fatigued and tired and hypoglycemic, and then they'll eat and they'll feel better. And so in those circumstances, it gets really difficult to do all the things to get them fat adapted or to be metabolically flexible, because they can't tolerate even normal glycemic control.
Yeah.
And so navigating that process is really difficult and takes time, because most people think that they're going to lose weight quickly because they've seen their friends do it and that's why they're here. And it's like, well, okay, there's a reason that you're still this way, even though you've done all these things for the past years. And now we're just going to have to navigate this in a much slower fashion.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, there's so many questions I want to ask. I got to check time. Okay. Great. 36 minutes.
Wow.
I always feel, I'm like, it feels like it's been 2 hours.
Yeah.
Because you just get in the rabbit hole. When we're looking at the field of health, and we're looking at the current model, and we said I'm trying to advocate for a new model. I'm talking to people like you to advocate for a new model and explore what's possible. I watched a documentary yesterday, which I mentioned, where it walked through the steps in which it just looked like there was some terrible bad actors in the regulatory agencies, specifically dealing with Lyme disease. Lyme spirochetes and Lyme bacteria as being like one of the most patented bacterias. Like it's literally, you look like it's like a play on the market in which all these biotech companies is like, I want a piece of that. I want a piece of that. I want a piece of that. And it's like, it's something near and dear to my heart. 425,000 people diagnosed every single year with Lyme. And often the great mimicker, of all these weird conditions. Do you feel that at times that there is like, I hate to use the word conspiracy theory, but there's like some sort of agenda towards the model of health you're trying to develop and the one that is in existence, or is it just gross negligence and incompetence, or maybe both?
It's really hard to say, and I mean, I'm not a huge speculator either way. But as far as what I see, the most difficult barrier to, I think, this model of medicine is the fear-based tactics that people have in the back of their mind for what health insurance is supposed to do. Because I think if you look at how much people spend on health insurance and what they get for it, this model makes more sense, right?
Yes.
So there's always the issue with catastrophe and having problems with big ticket items. But, from a probability perspective, it's low on an individual level. So if you take that and kind of hedge your bets, you'll err on the side of, I'm going to get most of my health under control, the 90% of things that I can actually change to improve my quality of life and to kind of prevent the onset of acute and chronic illness, and leave that 5% chance for catastrophe, right?
Yeah.
And then also with, the No Surprises Act that Trump and the administration passed to make sure that hospitals and different organizations tell people how much things are going to cost, or at least give them the estimate ahead of time. So there's no surprises, right? So there's no more excuse for getting a surprise bill after you go and get a procedure done or after you go to the ER, because they have to do their due diligence and actually tell you, here's what this is going to cost. Is this okay? And then you sign the consent to have the stuff done. If for some reason, you do your procedure and the hospital sends, here's your $20,000 bill, and you're like, well, hold on, you told me this is going to be like $2,500. You can actually just not pay it. Mm-hmm. Right. So then the hospital has to go through this whole debacle of getting things kind of squared away and getting reimbursed in a fashion they can. But that's going to be huge as far as transparency goes for clients or for people to know what something costs. So I always tell people, you think if you have a heart attack and you go get a bypass or you go into the cath lab and it's going to be some $40,000 procedure. But realistically, it's nowhere even close to that amount. I tell people the story of the circumstances of my son's birth. We ended up having, birthing center was the plan and just kind of do everything naturally. Well, that laughed at us and we had to have
plans change.
Transfer, emergency C-section, all that kind of stuff. And, we didn't have insurance. So I'm thinking in the back of my mind, look, this is going to be crazy. And so, we got the bill and there was a cash pay discount because we didn't have insurance. And, the bill got reduced from, over $30,000 to less than $10,000. And so if I had actually gone back and said, look, my deductible was, $750, my healthcare premium, what I pay per month for healthcare insurance would have been, around $750 for the family.
Mm-hmm. So
you multiply that by 12, and over the year you're spending, what's 1,500 times 6? Like $12,000 on health insurance, right? So just from my premiums, not getting anything back yet, not paying my deductibles, not paying my co-insurance, not doing any other out-of-pocket stuff, I already would have spent more than what I'd pay out of pocket for having the baby, for my wife having the baby.
Yes.
So, contextually, people just don't understand that because it's not in their ballpark to understand, right? You take your car to the mechanic and, what they tell you goes, right? You don't have the capacity to know everything, so you trust professionals to give you the right assessment, and that's what you're looking for when you have any kind of guide, whether it be for car or body.
Mm-hmm.
So the number one thing I think to help shift our awareness as a country for what health really looks like is to be transparent, right? What are the costs of these things really? If I just set aside that money that I'm paying in my healthcare premium every month for a rainy day, for a catastrophe, will I have enough, right? If you don't have a healthcare issue in 2 years and you've been saving up 2 years of healthcare premiums, in quotes, then you're kind of prepared for anything. You just have to have the discipline not to use those funds for anything.
Yes. It's so important. And just understanding our country's relationship with credit. That's it's challenged. There's many ways in which we could build that new model. The collective, I did a collective here in Texas for a while, which was like Newer Health or New Health, in which it was kind of like everybody paid in. Mm-hmm. Like a
health sharing type
thing. Like health share, like, $290 or $320 every single month, but you were covered for a catastrophe or a heart attack or an emergency room visit, it was interesting. It was so new and foreign how it operated, and they were figuring out the kinks. I didn't go with it for a while. Mm-hmm. I did it for like a year, and but people raved about it. People are like, no, my husband went through lung cancer, and everything was cut. They negotiated everything on behalf of the collective. So there's definitely people they're looking at different ways that we can be doing this.
Yeah. I think the most difficult thing with that so far that I've come up with, with the people that have the share accounts is they do have to pay for it up front and then get reimbursed after the fact.
Yes.
So there is still kind of like a need for some kind of financial stability heading into those kinds of procedures.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty wild, but everybody knows there's something new that needs to be done. That's a shift from where we're at now. Why medicine? Why health? What got you started into all this? Did you know from a very young age you wanted to be a healthcare provider?
No, honestly, from a young age, I wanted to work. I basically wanted to be either Jeff Corwin or Steve Irwin. Like, that was my thing. Like, I'd watch Animal Planet all day. I'd be outside hunting for, not hunting, but trying to find frogs and critters and all that kind of stuff. So that was my childhood, man, just exploring. And I think what that developed into was just an intellectual curiosity. So it went from just wanting to understand biology and nature in general, and kind of translating that to an endeavor that I could still be financially secure, mm-hmm. but also stay true to that explorer type of personality that I had. And so with medicine, starting in alternative with chiropractic and kind of figuring out that, from a scope of practice perspective, I wanted more. And that's when I went back into, conventional allopathy with nursing and the nurse practitioner route. But the whole time, working in the integrative and functional space with clinical neuroscience as well, really just helped me gain an understanding of what it would truly take to get people from point A to point B. And, through that process, I really figured out that, solving problems was really what wet my whistle. Like, just seeing something and working it out and kind of figuring out how to piece this puzzle together once you found the pieces was really what kind of drove me from an internal perspective. And, I never, again, I've never having really worked a day in my career, because it's just always something new and exciting, and I'm novelty driven. And so there's always something new. And, then starting the business, it's just been the perfect avenue for me to really exploit all the personality characteristics that kind of drive me forward.
Amazing. Yeah, you're really good at it, and you have a great team. You have a great crew here. It's a motley crew, and it's fun to show up and see. I already envision the next gen, and I know you're gonna run out of space. You feel that, right?
Yeah, I mean, this place is technically already full. Like, even if I wanted to hire another practitioner now, it's like there's no room for them. So it's definitely, once this lease is up, we're moving on for sure.
Yeah. I always I'm always called, where is the co-working integrated with this would be wild, or like daycare integrated with it. It's like it's like almost like, you a little bit of a mecca, and maybe everything's in one building, but there's just, it's great to sit here and take phone calls after I've done my ARX, or I've been on the light or the vibe plate, and you've been injected with some peptides, because you're like, I'm ready to go.
Yeah,
I'm fired up.
Yeah, it's like it's preconditioning for an optimal cognitive workday.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. Do you ever look around in the field and you're just like, it's funny. There's like this, it's a movement in which there's a lot of wellness practitioners, and maybe it's my bias, my bubble, and my silo, but you see people that are like, they're kind of ditching their practice to go do content creation, or they're like, well, I'm going to be, I obviously have a judgment about it because I'm mentioning it in a judgment, but you see people, they're like, oh, they're doing the book and the tour and the speaking and the yada, yada, yada. And then you like, I've done this before especially with Lyme. There's some big Lyme rock stars, some Lyme stars, and you go and there's no time slots. You go see the assistant to the assistant. They're off doing, the book tour and stuff. So you can't even talk to this person.
Yeah.
But it's a really interesting time. It's like, I always say, there's a great quote in Fight Club where we wanted to be gods and rock stars, and when that doesn't happen, we're pissed. So there is this pull. Do you ever see this? Do you feel like this is a real thing where people are like pulled away from like the real work, which is sort of here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, for sure. I mean, I think that's always kind of been, especially now branching into more of this kind of media space and kind of, trying to put my face out there and the clinic out there more. The day that I leave clinical practice is the day I die, right? So this is where I feel most meaning, right? And so, I feel that when people translate or transition from clinical practice into being more of the kind of social media personality, or, do the books, and, there's nothing against that. They're just driven more by that kind of validation and success than they are by where their patients are moving, again, from that A to B, right? So me always wanting to solve problems, that's where I want to stay. Eventually, if I do have some material for education, it's going to be more so to just educate. Like, people kind of laugh at how long my newsletters are in terms of, the average person doesn't read this much, and, no one's going to read it, and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, well, look, it's for me to get my thoughts down in a cohesive manner that's structured, that somebody might find useful.
Yeah.
Right? I'm not trying to sell things. I'm not trying to get this massive uprising to validate me. It's more about just, here's my experience. Here's how it might be helpful for this circumstance. Read it or leave it. Like, it's not an issue, right? Again, it's for me structuring my thought and structuring the way that I do things for me that might be helpful for other people.
Yeah. It's really well done. If anybody, your newsletter is great. Do you send that out to only your clientele, only your roster?
Yeah. It will be available. All the content that I make will be available on the Patreon. So for the people that do kind of want access to the content that we make with Dasein, it'll all be in that format.
Yeah, it's really well written.
Thank you.
And yeah, it's very original. I appreciate it. I remember your first newsletter. I was like, who does this guy think he is? This thing is long, but it was amazingly well written and structured, and there was obviously lots of intention behind the work. So, yeah, I applaud you for that and your efforts to make this, you know, something new and special and unique to you. Yeah, I don't mean to like call people out or call people in, but I witnessed that there is a cost. There's almost like well, you know the way the brain works, the way the dopamine pathways work.
Yeah.
That phone is it's powerful.
Yeah.
Do you know how many times I go in and I'm like, let me grab a number, and then like 20 minutes later I was like, what happened? I'm on the Kardashians like back black page, and there's like, you know, like liposuction treatment, and I'm like, what? How did it get here?
Yeah.
I went for a phone number.
Dude, I'll look at my phone and I'll get distracted. I'm like, why did I look at my phone? What was I trying to do? Oh yeah, I was going to calculate this, you know, whatever, just a little math problem. And from my finger trying to go to the calculator, always finds the red bubble notification instead. But yeah, no, it's a phenomenon that really needs to be, you know, addressed in terms of, especially when there's so few professionals that do a really good job with these kind of siloed conditions. And then they kind of get on this train of just educating other people, but you know, they kind of miss out on the fact that if they're the best at what they do, they should probably be doing what they're best at for the people that need the most help.
Yeah.
So there is kind of this, again, it's an opportunity cost, right? What are you losing out on by moving with a different opportunity?
Yeah. It's wild. It's wild. My head's spinning about how many times I've had this experience where, yeah, because as a patient, you see that. You're like, that's who I need to see.
Mm-hmm.
That's who I need to see to get better, because they speak great. You know, they got a great body of work. They have some. Yeah. There's a time when they had clinical practice, but I do witness and getting to interview these people too. It's also fascinating. I do witness that there is a cost. There's like an energetic cost, or like to building your community in this like virtual space.
Yeah.
As opposed to the physical. I always say it's like, you know, I love doing, and I learned so much from podcasts when I was not like well enough to read.
Yeah.
But I could listen, and like Tim Ferriss and Dave Asprey and all these guys that were just like having these great conversations around health. I was like, God, this is fucking valuable. You know, I remember just what a great way to download information. Podcasts are pretty unique. When you do start to put out content, or when you do start to refine your message in that way, you said you're doing Patreon a little bit right now. Why not give ideas? You could partner with somebody that was like a media person to help, again, like build the bridge. You just heard this on the MAP Society interview on Rogan. We always say building bridges, or the age of collaboration. Like it almost could be like you could have like an internal media team with the office.
I mean, fortunately, you know, I do kind of have I work with the name is Omnia. They're a little new startup here in Austin, and they're the ones that are handling all my media right now, as far as like putting this stuff on Patreon and getting me, you know, interviews and doing my little shorts on YouTube and Instagram. And you know, it's been really nice to just kind of hand it off to people to do it, because you know, again, it's just one less thing I got to do. And they tell me what's most common on Reddit, like what are people asking, like what kind of questions are people asking that I have competence in to actually answer. Right? So it's been really fun, you know, actually to get these thoughts out on video, because you know, with writing, it's really easy to get thoughts clear, and then in a conversational level, it is a technical test of the epistemic like success, right? So to really know what you know, and to be able to have a conversation about it and just lay it out like just back and forth, it really does kind of indicate a different level of mastery. And so it's good to practice that, because I've been devoid of that kind of practice.
Yeah. I find the conversations, it's you unpack these nuggets of gold that are just, you had no idea. You never would have got there by yourself.
Yeah.
And there's lots of times I'll be on with a friend or Natalie Nidham or Kristen, and we'll be talking. I'm like, we should have recorded this. This is gold. This is going to save the world someday.
Yeah. It's like you should always have a GoPro, just like 24/7 recording.
Yeah. Well, that was the thing with, as I've unpacked my, my journey and my healing, I'm amazed that, I never would have told myself that I was a people pleaser. I was like, I'm pretty independent. I do what I want. Like all my ex-girlfriends would be like, no, he does exactly what he wants. He doesn't please anybody. Don't take that in a weird sexual way. That was weird. But I've realized, I've had this awareness that when you are in the state of like achievement, like I'm a chronic achiever. So the idea of like always showing up, always doing a good job, always crushing it. What's on the other side of that? There's validation and love, and you see that cycle. It could drive someone to be could drive you to be insane.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and that kind of boils down to like really, and I do this a lot with the individuals I do the ketamine with, is expressing kind of who you are without all of your other roles and attachments besides just the self. Like, who are you if there is no one else here? Right? What does so-and-so do to kind of show that they love themselves enough to make this existence meaningful?
Yeah. Yeah. I interviewed Apollo Ono last year, and, most decorated Winter Olympian ever. And it was really fascinating. And he said he when he first got out of being a gold medal winner, that game, he was like, I was so lost. He's like, and I would go to these retreats with these other entrepreneurs, and they'd be like, who are you? He's like, I'm Apollo Ono. I'm gold medal winner. Most decorated Winter Olympian. They're like, who are you?
Yeah.
And they just kept going down like 10 questions. He's like, by the last one, you're blubbering and you're crying. I've heard I don't know if you ever listened to Alan Watts. He also says, he's like, when you start to examine who you are, it all just fades away.
Yeah.
Because who are you? Like, what is this collection of like pathways and choices and decisions and, violent physical movements or soft physical movements that is a human being?
Yeah. It's an interesting question to pose. You want me to answer it?
Yeah. Who are you?
Well, so fundamentally, again, it kind of goes back to I'm designed to survive and reproduce, right? That's at the forefront of my purpose here in life as an organism, right? I mean, that's the fundamental purpose and need, right? So within that, there's this subsets of what it means to survive. And, there's the basics of, figuring out how to get my homeostatic needs met, kind of going back to that whole conversation. And then beyond that, figuring out where I am along that process and, essentially discovering, I'm someone that with novelty will seek out new methods to make sure that I get those needs met all the time. And so that's more of, okay, now I'm going to use that motivation and drive in the society that we're in to mitigate my own suffering as much as possible, and then to mitigate other people's suffering as much as possible. And that will, again, feedback and elevate, across the board. If I were to lose, body parts or God forbid, my mind, that's always the question of, if something were to take away my fundamental mode of meaning and pleasure in the world to reduce suffering, like that's the self, right? So what keeps me from ultimately just kind of bowing out of existence? And that's ultimately where my self is. And, if I love life to the degree that it's mediated by my desire to survive and to help other people survive, not just in the way of getting fundamental needs met, but really reaching that conscientious perspective of not being satisfied completely with where you're at, but always moving towards potential. And so that's kind of where I identify myself as an explorer and as an intellectual, in the term of always moving the collective forward, And that's who I am.
Beautiful. I've never asked anybody that question, so you did great.
It's a tough one. And fortunately, I've thought about it before. So
yeah, it's big. It's a big one, and we never pause to do that. There's so many. When I look back in my rear view mirror, I was like, man, there's so many things that you're pushed along by a lot of the constructs that I'm very lucky to be born into the constructs I was born into.
Yeah.
I thought that yesterday. I was like, a friend came over. We were doing a friend came over. We meditated together, and then we did some biomagnetism, and then we did some Brown's gas. So, and then we went and got burgers at Hop Dotty.
Nice.
But we were thinking about this as like this, how we're pushed along in these constructs, and how until you really pause to examine, what's driving me to make these decisions? Like what's getting me up in the morning? But I was thinking about the constructs to which I was born into and how unbelievably king-like and royalty-like we live today. And it was like, look at this home. It's like I have all these gadgets that alleviate pain and suffering at the push of a button.
Mm-hmm.
I open up the refrigerator. It's like everything I could ever want to eat. I get in this mechanical automobile that drives me anywhere I want to go, like for hundreds and hundreds of hours. You know what I mean? It's mind-blowing the way we live today. Like if you had gone back 600 years on this feudalistic society and said one day, 7 generations after you,
Yeah.
they're going to have all these, like it'll make the king's life look like dirt.
Yeah. No, I mean, seriously, I mean, that kind of also boils down to one of the concepts within Dasein and Heidegger's philosophy is the concept of authenticity. And what it kind of consolidates into is knowing thyself, right? And so knowing kind of what are the unconscious motivators and drivers to be a certain way and to behave in a certain way, and then to actually utilize that to facilitate where you want to be and who you want to be. And so there's kind of this living inauthentically where you just kind of are running the programs that kind of were gifted to you as an adolescent and you kind of just latched onto coping-wise and defense strategy-wise, and then developing into someone who understands why you do the things you do, and then taking that forward with ownership and responsibility and kind of being awakened to what it means to be a conscious individual and an agent that can make life better.
Yeah. I want to gift you something for the office. I think it'd be really cool. Have you ever seen like the death calendars?
Mm-hmm.
With like the little, like it's like the 100
dots.
dots. Yeah. And you start filling out the years as you go by so you can see how much of the hourglass you have left.
Yeah.
It's so motivating.
Yeah, it's one of the memento mori calendars.
Yeah, it's really hard to be lazy. Or let me say this. It's hard to, when you know something needs to be moved on, when you know an action needs to be taken, it's almost impossible to deny it.
Yeah. There's a great YouTube video that uses Skittles as an analogy, and they've got this whole, table full of Skittles that represent like the days that you have.
Yeah.
And they go, like with how many days you waste sleeping and how many days that you'll spend on the toilet, how many days you'll spend like doing this. And then at the very end of it, it's like, here are the amount of Skittles you have to do something like with your conscious waking hours that are not spent doing things that you have to do otherwise. And it, ends up being a very small portion of your life, but that's where meaning is made. And when you understand that you only have this small allotment of Skittles, that's actually where you realize, wow, I actually do need to be more of an agent in how I decide to use these precious Skittles.
Yeah. Yeah, this certainly, like this work, like for me, like all this stuff, like the biohacking and the optimization and the peptides, it's amped me up so much as a human being. It really hasn't changed my fabric that is my DNA, but it certainly has amplified it. And it carries with me through everything I do in the grocery store, interactions with people. And the reflection that I get back is like, people are always like, I want more of what you have. Whatever you're doing, what are you doing? Mm-hmm. And, I usually start to talk about like how what a day looks like. So what does a day look like for you? If let's set work aside, if you can just feel like a day in which you're like a person would brush their teeth, what are some of the optimization things that you'll do? Really, you can give me some real specifics.
So as far as like optimization techniques, okay. So let's use a day that I kind of do all my things, right? So
okay.
So I'll wake up, I have my pre-workout set up next to my bed. So I set an alarm, I drink that, I go back to sleep. And so 30, 45 minutes later, the beta alanine kicks in and I'm itching out of my sheets and I'm just ready to go. So get ready. I come to the office, I hit the RX machines, we'll put the Katsu bands on. I'll use the vibration plate and, so we'll get a full body workout then, and then we'll jump in ice bath. I'll do the red light after that, kind of front and back with the big LED panels. And then, throughout the rest of the day, kind of using my perfect aminos to get, my protein intake in. I've got plenty of different little supplements and the things that I take. I've just been experimenting with some nootropics, CMAX and CellLink and 9-MMBC. And so really it's using kind of that as a platform to say that's my normal for a day like that.
Yeah.
And then how do I augment that with the different, variants? Obviously I've got my hormone optimization program that I run on myself, and always kind of tweaking things just to see, is there something that I can take from being kind of already optimized, at where I feel like I am, and then because that's actually the hardest population to work with, I feel like, is people that are generally optimized and still want more, because it's a 2 to 3% change they're looking for, and it's very hard to find things that are going to make that 2 to 3% difference that actually justify the cost of some of these things. So really it's about working through on a personal level what worked for me so I can generate data to actually help someone make a decision. And then that person becomes part of the pool of data so that I can say, now there's 2 people that have done this and they've felt this. So now you have a better updated model for generating the kind of expectation that they should have. So, after that day of office work, we'll go home and we'll, play with the kids and make dinner and just kind of have that family reset time. And then typically at nighttime, we kind of cap it off with, a few emails and reading and catching up on some of the personal stuff.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. Do you, I'll tell you what, one of mine has been lately is I have a laminated sheet that has feelings and needs on it. So I'm trying to expand my emotional vocabulary.
Nice.
Which would be a fun worksheet for you guys to have here.
Yeah.
Laminated. Because I'm always amazed when I'll get into it with somebody and their vocabulary for expressing what they're feeling is so limited. It's like there's like 4 words. You know how many words there are for gratitude or joy or fulfillment or community or connection and then on the flip side of the sheet is needs. It's like, so if you can constantly go into this, the nonviolent communication model, the model I follow is Be Loved Now, that I just love it. It's just like great. It's like that for me. Do you remember when they used to give you crayons at restaurants?
Yeah.
They should have feelings and needs playing cards. Like, how crazy would that be?
That'd be interesting. Yeah.
Maybe other people don't think of it as fun like I do, but I just feel like it's so. Once you start to do it once in a while and you start to unpack, you're like, man, we rode over and you said that thing to me. I was feeling, hurt, frustrated. I was feeling sorrow because I have the core need for connection, sovereignty, to be seen.
Yeah.
And you get these crazy emotional releases from it. You're like, I had no idea I had that core feeling. Yeah. That comes up a lot for me. Anyways.
No, I mean, that's
I would never call it a biohack, but it's a biohack.
Well, again, it's being more authentic, right? It's taking ownership over the very reasons that you're conscious in the first place, which are feelings, right? It's emote is to move out, right? And that's the root word, for emotion. And, at least my personal understanding of consciousness is that it did develop out of the need to contextualize different needs across time. And so to basically have the ability to have the interpretation of different sensory stimuli coming in that mean, okay, hey, you're hungry, or hey, your osmolarity is off, you need to drink water, or hey, it's it's that time, the testosterone surging, it's time to actually go, procreate. Like there's these different homeostatic affects that arise up that motivate you to move in a certain direction. And if we didn't have those, there would be no valuative process to choose one thing over the other. So when it kind of boils down to the primitive emotions that we're kind of born with or endowed with evolutionarily, Jaak Panksepp laid these out in a book called Affective Neuroscience. And it's seeking, so it's the euphoric drive of actual dopaminergic pursuit, right? And so that underlies kind of every movement forward, positive or negatively valenced as far as emotion goes. And then you've got care, which is the need to attach to, caregivers as infants, and it's a mammalian circuit in particular, mediated by oxytocin and opioids. And then you've got rage, which is fundamentally driven when you have withdrawal of expected reward, or if you're held against your will, or if there's a dominance dispute, right? And so a lot of people's rage is it's about the withdrawal of expectation.
Yeah, I want you to say that one more time. Rage. Can you give me those definitions? That was really powerful.
Yeah. So fundamental rage, like how you can elicit, across the board in a bunch of different species, is to withdraw an expected reward, right? So basically, like, set a mouse up to think that once you pull these levers, after he's been trained to get a reward at the end of it, they'll get certain neurocircuitry activated that are mediated through vasopressin and some a bit through testosterone to actually mitigate or to fix the problem, right? To be upset to the point where they can figure out why they didn't get the reward. And the other aspect of that too is that grief is also a fundamental emotion, and that's to essentially, well, it's called kind of separation distress is the more legitimate term, but it was designed to basically be able to protest when something of care or attachment is missing, right? So when you lose something, you're supposed to have this vocal distress and actually like cry out. You think of an infant when he loses his mom, or they play peekaboo and they disappear for a little bit. Baby doesn't know that you're coming back, so they activate this distress circuitry to vocalize that they're upset. But it's not rage, right? A baby crying because it's angry versus a baby crying because it's lost. Two different distress calls. So you've got seeking, care, lust is another one, fundamentally for reproduction, right? So the feelings of, motivated behavior from a sexual perspective. And then you've got play, which is another distinctly mammalian circuit for development of the prefrontal cortex. And then I think that's all 7.
Yeah, or 5. What's the book again?
Affective Neuroscience.
Okay. That sounds like
it's quite a tome, but yeah, it
sounds amazing.
Really, really, really solid for understanding the kind of evolutionary drivers of emotion and by proxy consciousness.
Yeah. I want to be okay. Now we're past our hour, ladies and gentlemen.
We did it.
We more than did it. I literally we could totally like pick like one topic a quarter and do these, because I think it'd be fascinating to unpack and go really, really deep on one of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's so much here. I'm so excited for people to see this interview and see what I have access to. If you want to come here, you can't because it's waitlisted, but you can get on a list. But there'll be a plan to facilitate for more people. Yeah.
Give me a couple years.
It'll be a minute. But there are other people doing it, and it's one of the most common questions that comes in. It's like, Freddie, do you think I should do this? Do you think I should do this? My number one answer is, who is your guide? How is that guide trained? What are their interests? What are they really invested in as far? Do they have an understanding of this big picture of mental, emotional, the physical, all of it? And they do exist. There are good programs that set people up to Sherpa people. Yeah. I'm stealing Sherpa Breath and Cold from Kristen all over the place. I should mention Sherpa Breath and Cold is a place you can get certified for breath and ice. Check that one out too. But that's really what you're doing. And so I just think it's so important to have that guide. So I celebrate the training that you've done and the care that you've taken in putting this together.
Appreciate it, man.
Yeah, it's impressive. I'm and I'm a difficult, I would say I'm sort of a difficult case, and I'm like, as I'm really feeling like the data and the numbers and my blood work and all the things that I've learned about myself in our like short, 6 months together, something like that, that I'm as curious as ever. So
Yeah.
I'm stoked.
Yeah. Yeah. And, the other interesting thing is, when people still have issues post blood work that looks really solid, right? It's like, hey, on one hand, it's really nice because, most of the stuff that would kill you is not going to kill you, right? But it makes it even harder to kind of parse out what exactly we can do to get those small things that are still big things, but are segregated from the kind of classic workup that we can do with, functional integrative medicine. And that's where, tools like the ozone and, hemotherapy and, using rapamycin, for example, right?
Mm-hmm.
So different toys and different tools.
Yeah. We'll do we could do a Freddie episode one day. We could like pull up labs on like a computer screen or something. I would share all that with everybody.
Yeah.
It's always fascinating to me, and I'm also amazed that like blood work is like the standard for diagnostic, when it's like, from my understanding, like the body is going to try to keep blood work at a homeostatic level. So there are other areas in which we don't really diagnose the lymph. There's like so much lymph fluid, right?
Yeah.
That's how our immune system proliferates organs. It's like, that's sort of an undiscovered country.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but it would be nice to definitely have a validated measure through, lymphatic sampling. But yeah, it's a different level of difficulty.
Yeah, I think there could, I'll not to make this a long interview because we already did, but there's I was watching this documentary again, and it was Neil Spector's team, who's since passed away, at Duke University, looking at imaging spirochetes through a scan. He was like, "Oh, the left knee's hurt. It's full of spirochetes." And they've tested it out on animal models. It's really wild.
Well, I think if they use synovial fluid as a sample, because, especially with spirochetes wanting to be anaerobic and out of oxygenated environments, that's kind of why they navigate to the places that are typically low oxygen to begin with.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, without pulling fluid. This is like an MRI.
Oh, interesting.
They're going to like image it based off the proteins that are falling off these spirochetes in real time. So it's really wild to see some of the, there's these brains out there that are just like working. It's so exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, we'll get the spirochete imaging machine in at the center. Closing questions. We're walking down the street. I see you in, I was going to say Walmart, Whole Foods. I see you at Walmart.
I haven't been in a Walmart. I can't remember.
I went in a Walmart a couple months ago. It's interesting. It's a different, it's a great reminder of? That there's people that are thinking, feeling, and behaving and buying in a different fashion than you do. And that is a majority of the country. And that is the bridge we need to build. That's the bridge. It's not the biohackers and the people shooting peptides.
Yeah, it's the general population.
Yeah. It's how do you get people excited about that? What's the shiny thing? Anyways, that's what we're going to do. So if we're let's just say we find each other in Walmart, what do you tell me that you do? Like 30-second
Oh, God.
conversation.
I hate this question so much.
Good.
Woof. I mean, so if I'm walking up, and someone has a conversation, they ask me what I do. Basically, to keep it at 30 seconds, I just say I'm a healthcare consultant, right? So I take care of everything from conventional medical illnesses and needs, and obviously with the hopes of reversing those kinds of conditions, all the way up to hormone replacement therapy and optimization, and really kind of plugging in the mental health aspect of it too. So it's really conglomerating in physical health, cognitive health, and emotional and spiritual health, kind of all in the same bucket. And that's generally enough to kind of garner a response that's, oh, this is different. And then you say, here's my card, or, go look at the website and let me finish shopping.
Great. All right. Second question. The Beautifully Broken podcast. What does it mean to you to be beautifully broken?
So, when I hear that, I definitely think of in terms of guiding people through trauma and different experiences that lead to, either aberrant belief structures or value systems or whatnot. Basically, accepting, radically accepting that things happen and there's nothing to be done about it after the fact, and that the only thing to do with the brokenness is to adopt it as a part of you that's led you to a certain place, and that now you have the opportunity to make that life beautiful, right? So out of brokenness, and that has definite degrees of what it could mean, but essentially rising from whatever ashes came from it, right? And just making a new life out of the past, because again, you get dealt the hand of cards that you're dealt, and how you play the hand is ultimately what's beautiful about it.
Beautiful. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here with Caleb Greer. This is the Beautifully Broken podcast. Thanks for hanging with us. Check this one out on YouTube. Love you guys. Namaste.